Hi, I'm Jeff Murrah, and I want to welcome you to True Texas History. I'm glad that you're here today. Today, we are going to be talking about the surrender of San Antonio. Well, actually, the life of Martin Perfecto de Cos, and he was involved in the surrender of San Antonio. Yeah, you read the history books and you see references to him. Who was this guy? And why was he important? Well, we're going to go ahead and take a look at that today. Martin Perfecto de Cos, with Perfecto as the middle name, it reminds me of a cigar, but Martin Perfecto de Cos, and it's C-O-S, not C-O-S-T, because there's a city in Texas named Cos, but it's not the same. He was a Mexican general. We see him rising to people's attention during the Mexican Revolution, when Mexico was throwing the Spanish out. Cos had served under Jose Morelos in some of his campaigns. And along the way, he also married Santa Anna's sister. Now, when Santa Anna rose to power, there were some difficulties in Texas, because when Santa Anna rose to power, one of the things that he did away with the Constitution of 1824 and made himself supreme ruler. Now, in doing so, it set the stage for some other problems to develop. But when there was some unrest in Texas, mainly the Anahuac disturbances, he sent Cos, his brother-in-law, into Texas to go ahead and settle things. Cos went ahead and landed troops, settled the whole Anahuac disturbance, and along the way, he went ahead and stationed a garrison at Goliad. He broke up the Congress of the Coahuila y Texas region of the area, and that is where Ben Milam and Anton Villesca had been captured, when they did that and went down to Monclova. So his forces did several things before finding themselves there in San Antonio. He originally arrived in Texas in September, and think about the timeline in terms of some of the events here. He arrives, sets up his headquarters. You have this whole episode there in Gonzales. Then you're faced with losing the men who had manned Goliad. Then San Antonio itself, which is serving as your headquarters, starts getting surrounded by the Texians. Originally there seems to be some skirmishes, but they go from skirmishing to going ahead and doing a full-on assault into the city and your headquarters. It's quite a change within a short period of time. And Cos also had heard that there was a detachment of more soldiers coming to help his situation in San Antonio. In fact, he was banking on it. So he sent out a detachment of some of his men to greet them and essentially escort them back to San Antonio. The problem is the force he sent out to do the escorting, they deserted. And with that desertion, he lost a lot of his fighting power. Not only that, his men were very demoralized. They had a few run-ins with the Texians, and at this point there had been no really major knockdown, drag out, heavy duty battles. I mean, you could say Concepcion, but it was a small scale engagement, and but Mexican forces were terrified of the Texians. The Texans come in there, and so he sees the situation as hopeless. Morale is low, and he goes ahead. And on the morning of December the 9th, 1835, he raises the white flag and goes ahead and surrenders the city. Now, when they have him there, the Texians go ahead and they come up with some agreements that he is supposed to agree to. Actually, there's like 18 conditions that it's supposed to meet. And I'm not going to go through all 18, but I mean, some of the things were after the surrender, he has to leave the city within 6 days. And I think this is one reason why there's some confusion in some of the historic documents as to when all this happened, because although he surrendered on the 9th, it was several days later before he went ahead and left the city. And of course, after he left the city, there was a big celebration, big fiesta by the Texians. And rightly so, because this was their first major battle. When you think about the major battles that were fought by the Texians, basically they won two: San Jacinto and the Siege of San Antonio, or Siege of Bexar. And getting back to Cos and the agreements, some of the agreements that were made, some of the conditions, number 13, the citizens shall be protected in their persons and property. Then number 16, no person, either citizen or soldier, to be molested on account of his political opinions hitherto expressed. At least back then, they allowed you to express political opinions, and they wanted assurances that there was not going to be any payback because you expressed your political opinions. It would be nice if we had some of that nowadays. Of course, the prisoners of both armies were put at liberty, and they had one copy of it in English, one copy of it in Castilian Spanish. So they wanted to make sure that it was proper. They allowed him to go ahead and return to Mexico. The men could keep their arms, just agreeing not to come back to Texas in defiance of the Constitution of 1824. Now, Cos had come to Texas with the intention of removing all North Americans who had come into Texas since 1830 and remove all the people that were identified as troublemakers by Santa Anna. Those were his stated intents. Now, he did not succeed in them, although he tried. Cos went ahead and left the city. Now, keep in mind, December, he leaves the city. And strangely enough, it takes a while for what's left of his army to go ahead and reach the border. And they went from San Antonio to Laredo. When they reached Laredo, Santa Anna's forces were arriving. So they joined up, and Cos went ahead and returned with Santa Anna to San Antonio. His men fought, and I believe it was either the northwest or northeast corner of the Alamo battle they were involved in, and the fighting. Cos was later captured at San Jacinto and later paroled. He also saw some action in the Mexican-American War, which was a few years later. You don't hear a whole lot about his other military exploits, but he did go ahead and surrender the city this day. He managed to buy, I believe it was 6 days. The Texans gave him 6 days to leave the city, to gather together his belongings, and also the wounded, and the hospitalized would be taken care of. Now, when the Texians managed capturing San Antonio, that gave them arms and ammunition and supplies, and they felt like they were sitting high on the hog. That they were doing great. Of course, that's why they had the big fiesta. So this will give you some background of what was behind the whole surrender of San Antonio, and understanding who Martin Perfecto de Cos was, how things quickly went from bad to worse during his tenure in Texas. Things just fell apart on him, even though he was Santa Anna's brother-in-law. So anyways, I mean, he was in a difficult situation that was next to impossible to go ahead and stay on top of. When he had originally sent, like the Urgateca people out to Gonzales to asked for the cannon, he was hoping for peaceful containment, but that didn't happen. In fact, after Cos arrived in Texas, there were some of the colonists that wanted to kidnap him and possibly kill him, but the powers that be, the Texian leaders, did not want Cos kidnapped at that point. So there were attempts to go ahead and do that, though. So that will give you an idea of who Martin Perfecto Cos was, a little bit of his background, and the difficult situation he was in. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave your comments. I always welcome a thumbs up, and hope you have a good weekend. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye. Vaya con Dios, my friends.